Hey, third grade, it's Mrs. Seals back for our next science lab. So the past couple weeks, we talked about the sun. We talked about the relationship between the sun, earth, and moon. And for the next couple weeks, we're going to be moving on and talking about the planets in our solar system, which is super fun, super exciting. One of my favorite things in science to talk about. So today we're going to start out just by talking about the inner planets. So let's go ahead and get started. Your target says I can identify the planets in Earth's solar system and their position in relation to the sun. So when we're talking about the solar system and learning about the solar system, a lot of times we see pictures like this, which, it's nice to be able to see what each planet looks like because, we're not very familiar with what the other planets besides Earth look like. We don't see them often. However, there are a lot of problems with pictures like this. The first problem with a picture like this is that the sizes of each of the planets are not to scale. And what that means is they don't have the correct relationship to each other when we're talking about size. Another thing that is a problem with pictures like this is that it makes it seem like all the planets orbit or revolve around the sun in a line and that they always stay lined up nicely. And that's just not true. Okay, we're going to talk and learn about how the closer a planet is to the sun, the shorter its revolution period is, or the shorter amount of time it takes for that planet to orbit the sun one time. That's because it has, a shorter distance to go. So obviously it's not going to take as long. So the planets are rarely, if ever, lined up nice and neatly like this. Also, this is kind of showing that the planets are all an equal distance apart from each other, which is also not true. So when you see pictures like this, you need to remember that they're not entirely accurate, which is one big problem with, seeing pictures of space and learning about space and looking at models. Because space is so big, it's difficult to create models that are accurate when it comes to the size of the planets and the distance apart that they are. However, this is good for knowing the order of the planets and what they look like. All right, so keep that in mind. So the inner planets are the 4 planets that are closest to the sun. The first 4 planets in our solar system. These are Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. We're just going to focus on these 4 planets this week. Next week, we'll be learning about the 4 outer planets, okay? So Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. We're going to talk a little bit about each one, and then I'm going to tell you a couple of things that all 4 of these planets have in common. So let's start by talking about Mercury. Mercury is the closest planet to the sun, but it is not the hottest planet. A lot of people think because it's the closest, it's the hottest, and it is not. The reason is because it does not have an atmosphere. Remember, we talked about how an atmosphere are layers of gases and clouds that surround, like the Earth has an atmosphere. And that's good because planets that have atmospheres, that atmosphere can trap in the heat and keep us warm. But Mercury does not have an atmosphere. So the side that is facing away from the sun gets very, 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 very cold. And the part that's facing the sun gets very, very, very hot. Okay, so that's important to remember. It's the closest to the sun, but it is not the hottest. Mercury is the smallest planet out of all 8 planets. And here's what I was talking about a minute ago. Mercury takes only 88 days to orbit the sun. It has the fastest revolution because it has the shortest distance to go. So we talked about last week, the Earth's revolution period is 365 days or 1 year. Mercury's is only 88 days. That's not even 3 months. Okay, that's very short because it's closest to the sun. It doesn't have very far to go. In 1974, a spacecraft called Mariner 10 actually landed on Mercury. It's the only spacecraft to ever have landed on Mercury. So that's how we know so much about this planet. All right, so important things about Mercury I want you to remember. It's the closest to the sun, but it's not the hottest. It's the smallest. It only takes 88 days to orbit the sun, and it was explored by a spacecraft called Mariner 10 back in the 70s. All right, so that's Mercury. Let's talk about Venus. Venus is the second planet from the sun. And here we go. Even though it is further away from the sun than Mercury, it is actually hotter. It is the hottest planet. This is because it has a very thick atmosphere to trap the heat in, unlike Mercury. So that means when the sun shines on Venus, the very thick clouds trap the heat in. So even the part that's facing away from the sun stays warm because it's kind of like a blanket trapping the heat in instead of letting it all escape like Mercury. It's very dry and rocky, and the atmosphere is actually a very thick layer of toxic clouds made of carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is what we breathe out, and it can be very dangerous for us to breathe in and all other animals. So this is one of the reasons, there are many, but this is one of the reasons why animals are not able to survive on Venus, because of its toxic clouds. Venus is often called Earth's sister because it is almost the same size as Earth, and it's the closest planet to Earth. However, besides those two things, Venus and Earth really don't have a lot in common. They're basically the same size and they're the closest, but that's it. Venus and Earth are very different in all the other ways. All right, so to recap about Venus, important things: second planet from the sun, hottest planet, very dry and rocky, toxic clouds made of carbon dioxide, and Earth's sister because they are similar in sizes, and it's the closest planet to Earth. Then we come to Earth, our home planet. Earth is the third planet from the sun. Our atmosphere has oxygen. That's one reason why people and animals are able to survive here, because we have oxygen to breathe. Earth is the only planet known to have living things. However, since space is so vast and there's so much of space that hasn't been explored yet, a lot of scientists believe that it is possible that there are other planets out there, not in our solar system, that also have life, but it hasn't been proven yet. It's just, there's so much about space we don't know because it is so big. But it is the only planet known to have liquid bodies of water. So there are some other planets that do have frozen water. There are some other planets that have been found to have traces of liquid water, but Earth is the only known planet to have liquid bodies of water. So we mean oceans, lakes, rivers, streams, ponds, all of those things. Then we come to Mars, our last inner planet. Mars is the fourth planet from the sun. Mars is known as the red planet. This is because the soil is full of iron minerals that rust, and that's what gives it that reddish color. If you've ever seen something rust, it's kind of that reddish orange color. Mars has frozen water found in the polar ice caps. So that goes back to what I was saying before. It doesn't have liquid water, but it does have some frozen water. And Mars is home to the largest mountain in our solar system, which is pretty interesting. A lot of people think that Earth is the only planet with mountains, but it is not. Mars has mountains as well, and actually some that are larger than the mountains on Earth. All right, so to recap, along with everything else I just told you, another thing I want you to know about the inner planets, they have a couple of things in common. In addition to being the 4 planets that are the closest to the sun, they are also what we call rocky planets or terrestrial planets. That means they are made of rock. They have solid surfaces. So if we could get to them and land on them, you would be able to physically walk and stand because they are made of rock. They're rocky planets. Also, they are the 4 smallest planets in our solar system. Next week, we're going to talk about the outer planets, which are much larger, and they're not solid rocky surfaces. They're actually gas giants. They're made of gas, similar to the sun, but they're not stars, they're planets. So that's important that you know about that, about the inner planets. They're the closest to the sun. They have rocky, solid surfaces, and they're the smallest planets. So don't forget in Schoology after this, there's a short quiz. It's just for fun. It's not required. It's to see what you know about the inner planets. The kids in class will be doing this sort where there are all these facts about the inner planets. They'll be cutting them out and gluing them on this paper. I'm not going to cut them out and glue them, but I'll quiz you. So I'll give you a fact. I'll give you a second to think about it, and then I'll tell you the answer. The first one says the first planet from the sun. Give you a second to think about it. Hopefully you came up with Mercury. Mercury is the first planet from the sun. Then we have the hottest planet. Give you a second to think about it. It's not Mercury, even though Mercury is the closest. Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere. The hottest planet is Venus. It has that very thick atmosphere that kind of acts like a blanket and traps the heat in. This planet's atmosphere has oxygen. I'll give you a second to think. Hopefully that one was easy for you. The Earth is the planet whose atmosphere has oxygen. Thank goodness. Otherwise, we would not be able to live here, right? This planet has water only found in its polar ice caps, frozen water in its polar ice caps. If you'll remember, that's Mars. It doesn't have liquid water, but it does have frozen water. The third planet from the sun, that's Earth. Very good. Our home planet, also Earth. Very good. That's where we live. Home to the largest mountain in our solar system. If you'll remember, that's Mars. Good job. Then we have the second planet from the sun. Hopefully you came up with Venus. Mariner 10 was the first to visit this planet in 1974, and actually the only spacecraft that's visited this planet. That's Mercury. Good job. A dry, rocky planet covered in toxic clouds. That's Venus. Good job. The fastest revolution, which remember would be because it is the closest to the sun, Mercury. Very good. And then we have the fourth planet from the sun, Mars. Good job. All right. I hope that you guys had fun learning about the inner planets. I will see you next week when we talk about the outer planets. Have a good day. Bye-bye.